Good evening, everybody. I'm Lloyd Auerbach, your host and guide to Ask Professor Paranormal. Welcome tonight, and we can get started. If anyone has any questions right off the bat, but before we do that, I'll mention that if you're not subscribing to this channel, I hope you do, or you tell your friends about it, of course. And also, I wanted to mention that I'll be announcing this week, once we finally make the decision on the topic, a lecture I'll be doing for the Rhine Research Center. It'll be the evening of November 10th, um, evening Eastern Time, late afternoon, very late afternoon Pacific Time. And we're tossing around a few topics. That'll be actually live and in person at the Rhine Center in Durham, North Carolina, and streamed online as well. So you'll be able to attend it online as well. And the following day, if anyone is in the Durham, North Carolina area, I'll also be announcing a workshop I'm going to be doing at the Rhine Center, which will not be streamed. It'll just be for local folks. We'll talk about that at some other time. So in any event, that's a couple things coming up. If you're here in the Bay Area, hi, Paul, good to see you. But if you're here in the Bay Area, know that on October 27th in the evening, there is the Ship of Spirits and Spaghetti evening on the USS Hornet Aircraft Carrier Museum in Alameda, the Haunted Hornet. There's going to be a spaghetti dinner, followed by a presentation by me on the early investigations I did there, and that'll have video, short interview clips with many of the early witnesses. We'll be kind of showing what they found, what they saw around the ship. And then that'll be followed by a tour, flashlight tour, of course, with an emphasis on ghosts of the Hornet that night. That is the evening of October 27th. It's uss-hornet.org. So you can just look up the United States USS Hornet Aircraft Carrier Museum. All right. Yes, it could have been called spaghetti. I'll tell them that for next time as well. Anyway, those are the two events that I have coming up as well. Please feel free to say hi if you come. I've got a few people who've already contacted me about the Hornet piece, and we'll actually be there as well. So last weekend, just kind of to continue until we get a question here, I was one of the folks from the Forever Family Foundation running one of our grief retreats. We have a grief transformation retreat that the foundation runs 4 times a year. The next one's going to be in January in Fort Myers, Florida. And then there are 2 in Connecticut, I believe in March or April, and then another one in July. We'll be back here in the Bay Area next October. And these are really directed at people who are in grief, whether it's a recent death of a loved one, family member, or it's some situation where you just simply can't get over a death of someone in the family. And our grief retreats are featured in episode 4 of the Netflix series Surviving Death, if you want to see what they're like. But we include presentations on the evidence for the afterlife. But there's also several mediums that participate. Typically, we have 3 mediums working with people, doing readings for people, and then we also have there's a 4th medium who actually does more of a large-scale gallery reading for folks. And then we have a grief counselor, somebody who specializes in grief therapy, who's part of our foundation board, who also presents. So if you're interested in learning about future events like that, the grief transformation retreats, definitely go to foreverfamilyfoundation.org. That's one of the links that is in the description for this channel. So yeah, I'm sorry to hear Sunset. Sorry to hear that your mom just passed. And my email, which you can see in the description also, if you want to contact me, if you need to connect with a medium that way, I'm happy to hook you up with somebody too. All right, so the Gmail account, I don't have that up in front of me right now. So Joanna, it looks like, we investigate residences trying to disprove, find scientific explanations. That's good. I hope you help the people, regardless of what's going on. If you can find normal explanations, that's great. We do that as part and parcel of our process as parapsychologists when we do investigations. If someone asks for help, we try to provide help in one way, shape, or form. Part of the process, though, is determining not just if the overall case has explanation, but whether each of the individual events has an explanation. Because what we find is that you can have an entire case where there's nothing paranormal. People have made mistakes, essentially, but the things that they've grouped in there are all different explanations, normal explanations. And in the vast majority of my good cases, the ones where there has been something psychic or paranormal happening, at least some things people are reporting as connected to that actually do have explanation. So we have to kind of eliminate all those first as well. Is it possible for a person to be haunted? We think she might have brought something on herself. Well, okay. It depends what you mean by that. So individuals sometimes have experiences that, of course, could be psychological, could be mistaken perceptions because they're trying to find something to blame what's going on in their lives. They're trying to blame things on it. So we've had people who've lost their jobs. Because they lost their jobs, they lost their relationship, something happened there, and they will say that they've got a spirit attached to them or spirits doing that. Yeah, that's actually not what's going on. That's normal. Emotions and things. We create problems for ourselves when we are in a bad state, you might say. However, there are circumstances where apparitions or ghosts, if you want to call them that, are hanging around family members. And there can be any number of reasons why that happens. And then there are circumstances which are pretty rare where we hear something about something called spirit attachment. And that usually happens in circumstances when someone who has an issue, let's say they're very neurotic or they're an addict, they're an alcoholic, and it seems that because they're hearing or experience something that is seemingly outside themselves, it seems that there is a spirit attached to them. Those can be dealt with without even an investigation with hypnosis. There is something called spirit releasement therapy. It's a purely hypnosis-based process. It doesn't necessarily confirm there's a spirit there, but people under hypnosis with someone who's an appropriate therapist, they'll work through a process that helps more or less detach in that way. So that's something that can happen. So people in that way can be haunted, but we can also be haunted by our own obsessions and addictions and things like that. I mean, people do get obsessed with things too. So that's something to consider always. And thank you, Joanna, for saying that. Yeah. So help should always be the number one goal of any group going into a residence where people have asked for help. Different situation if you're going to a public location, typically. Paul, you're going to see the documentary After Death at your local movie theater. I was unaware. Is that related to the Samparnia project? I'm not even aware of that one. Haven't been aware of that. Kelly, hi. I'm glad you're a member of the Forever Family Foundation. And folks, you can join the FFF for free. So please consider doing that. Go to the website and join us as well. Okay. Yes, and if you're new here, please do hit like and subscribe. Let your friends know about it, and come back with some good questions as well. Hi, Liz. All right, and thanks, and hi, Vicki. Good to have you all here. And just kind of looking forward, I'll mention this now, I'll mention it again, certainly next time, especially next time. But our next session will be in 2 weeks. And then we're going to be skipping to 3 weeks after that, just the first time. So it'll be like November 19th, just because I'm going to be traveling on those other 2 Sundays. All right. Sunset. If we are haunted by our own obsessions, wouldn't that be considered a mental health issue? Yes. But, being stuck in a rut is a limited mental health issue. It is a mental health issue for sure, but it's not as strong a mental health issue as clinical depression or some other issues. People do go through periods where they're kind of obsessed with doing something, or, people get obsessed with a TV show. I've known people who felt like they started watching a show like Game of Thrones, and they had a binge. They felt like they had to binge the whole thing and not do anything. And we see sometimes these things show up on in comedies quite often. So that becomes a kind of a temporary obsession. I assume that after Game of Thrones was done, that they were done with that, unless they watched it again. I know people are obsessed with Star Trek. I know people are. That's not necessarily a mental health issue. Just it's hard to say how far that goes. All right, Paul. It's about near. This is the afterlife documentary. It's about people's near-death experiences. They interview real NDEers not related to Sam Parnia. Okay, so I probably won't go to see. I don't know that it's even playing in any of the theaters around here. In the suburbs, we usually don't get a lot of the movies that might play in San Francisco. For example, Nandor Fodor and the Talking Mongoose didn't play anywhere. I think it played maybe one place in Berkeley, but it played mainly at a couple of theaters in San Francisco. I just bought it. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So I kind of doubt that's going to be anywhere near me for that. And given the COVID circumstances right now, I'm being real careful about even going to theaters. We're fortunate we have a theater locally that has plenty of times I can go, and I might be one of 8 people in the theater. All right, Graveyard Grog. I'm obsessed with MASH right now. And all right, yeah, people, I can't say I'm obsessed, but I just finished watching over several months, mind you, every episode of Night Court. So 9 seasons of Night Court. And right now I'm going through and not watching it as a binge, but I'm going to be going through every episode of the old Wild Wild West. And I've done that with other shows as well. So I don't get obsessed with them, but I do have intention to actually finish them. And for me, I think that kind of obsession for binging, it doesn't happen. And I'm pretty sure it's because I grew up in the TV industry. So with my family. So it just doesn't really happen the same way. Paul, I'm glad that it's playing near you. That's good. That's good. And yeah, that's not great. Night Court is on a couple of the free services, including Freevee, as it happens. That's how I actually watch it, through Amazon Prime. Yellowstone. Yeah, some people, that's another show. There are certain shows that I just simply like to watch every week, and just really depends on what it actually is. So Paul, I used to watch Night Court when it was on. Also a big fan of Big Dan of Magnum PI. Big fan of Magnum PI, and actually I really like the new Magnum PI as well. For those of you that maybe didn't see Night Court the first time around, it was Harry Anderson, who was a phenomenal comedy magician. But it's worth watching. I actually forgot how funny the show actually was. I've also got a DVD, 2 sets of different seasons of a show from the 1960s, which is a little politically incorrect, called F Troop, which I'm going to be watching as well. All right. After Death seems like a knockoff of Surviving Death, even the same music. Interesting. That is interesting. Thanks for letting us know, Mariah, about that. Midsummer Murders. Harry Anderson passed a few years ago. He was a really funny guy, really great presenter. All right. Can you talk more about remote viewing and telepathic connection? Well, in general, remote viewing doesn't have much to do with telepathy at all. It is real-time or precognition, ESP. Although it's been stated that perhaps in some remote viewing experiences, the remote viewers are actually connecting to someone who is present at the location telepathically and seeing with their eyes, more or less. But in general, we do know that remote viewing can be done completely without anyone present at the location. So that's not a telepathy thing for sure. But telepathy is just one form of how non-sensory perception, or ESP, or non-local perception works. It's all part of the same process as well. Okay, Kelly, we do that with mostly older shows. Just got one done with Dick Van Dyke. That's a great show, old show. Diagnosis Murder, also Dick Van Dyke. Wasn't it? Was that The Dick Van Dyke Show? I know he did a medical show as well. Thank you, Graveyard Grog. Yeah, that's a line from the Heck Howie on F Troop. Um, so, all right, Paul, it's not Magnum without Tom Selleck. We've kind of gone off on a tangent, which is fine. I love talking about TV as well. So, I know some people just had a hard time with Hawaii Five-O also, which was a great show. Same production company. All right, Tina, welcome. New York Comic Con. Oh, there's one of these days I'll get to one of the Comic Cons. It's a New York Comic Con. Um, and some of the Comic Cons do have paranormal panels. It's just really tough for me to kind of drop everything to head to New York, especially when I already had some things booked. All right, Paul, you go to the Society for Psychical Research Facebook page, very informative. For those of you who don't know, the Society for Psychical Research, that organization is the oldest running research organization and educational organization. It was founded in 1882 in the UK. It is still very active. They actually were very fortunate a number of years ago that one of the members who believed in what the foundation the society was doing, left a bequest, put in his will decades ago for a piece of property, which wasn't worth much when he put it in his will. But after he died, it was worth 750,000 pounds, British. So that actually has supported a number of projects for the SPR, including enhancing their website and, most importantly, the Psi Encyclopedia, which is the best source of information about the paranormal and psychic phenomena and research and everything else. But I really recommend joining the SPR. They do have webinars from time to time. With great people, they have really interesting available information. If you're a member, you get access to the past journals, and it's really just a very good source. You can just simply Google Society for Psychical Research. Our field, parapsychology, used to be called psychical research, and we still talk about it that way as well. They do have a great Facebook page. I suggest following them on X, Twitter, and other platforms as well, because they put out some really good information. Didn't someone well-known remote view another planet? Yes. Ingo Swann, who was he didn't really remote view, he did something else, but Ingo Swann, who was the founder of the method or model for remote viewing, was also well known as someone who could travel out of his body. I mean, that's what his claim was. He could do an out-of-body experience, kind of on consciously on demand, that kind of thing. And in his 1976 book, To Kiss Earth Goodbye, he describes going out of his body at one point and traveling to the outer planets, to Jupiter and Saturn, out of body. Beyond the speed of light, kind of speed of thought kind of thing. And when in his book, he describes rings that are not visible normally around Jupiter. They're not visible with a telescope typically. He describes some certain structural features of the rings of Saturn and a number of other things which were later proven out by Voyager when Voyager actually got to Jupiter and Saturn and took pictures. So that in itself was pretty interesting. Ingo, as well as other people who do out-of-body and remote viewing, said the two are different. Because in out-of-body experience, you feel like you've gone to that location. You feel like you're not connected to your body the same way. In remote viewing, the information comes to you. Now, people like Joe McMoneagle have talked about looking at Mars, and there have been remote viewers who looked at the moon and other things. And some things for Swann, especially later in life, got a little hazy in terms of whether or not he was really picking up something on the moon or not. But definitely, there's not a limit, it seems, to remote viewing, and there's not a limit to, apparently, when you go out of body, for that matter. All right, Comic-Con next year, 17th to 20th. All right, I'll see what I can do, Tina. I'll see what I can do. I'm sure my family would be happy to have me back in New York at that time. All right, Paul, you got to join Kelly to Paul. Yeah, just, again, the Society for Psychical Research, go to that page. And one thing, I'll just put this in everybody's head. I've been asked by people every once in a while to say, this is in interviews. So what are you going to do? Are you going to become a ghost when you're dead? Are you going to hang around here? Or are you going to go to the other side? And I said, well, I usually say, well, I'm going to eventually go to the other side. But given that Ingo Swann could go to Jupiter and Saturn pretty much in an instant, I figure I might as well explore the galaxy a little bit. I am a Star Trek fan, and that means I want to see what's out there. So if I die and don't immediately get pulled to the other side, yeah, I might haunt a few of the skeptics first, kind of piss them off, play with them a little bit, because some of them deserve it. But no, but my thought is in my head, I'm going to travel the world. Then I'm going to travel off the world. I know I won't have to worry about breathing. That's something Ingo and others have said. So we'll see what happens. All right. I'm in no hurry to find out, though. I will tell you that right off the bat. Okay. Can remote viewing go into lucid dreaming if you fall asleep while trying to remote view? Sure. In fact, if you are in a lucid dream, which is a dream in which you are aware you are dreaming, you are in control of the dreamscape. You are in control of your own consciousness. You can tell yourself you want to talk to some deceased relatives. You can say, let's change the scene to the real landscape of Mars. To basically combine remote viewing with that lucid dream as well. So if you are trying to remote view when you're going to sleep, it is possible that could spill over into an actual dream, but you have to remember that dream after, and it wouldn't be one in which you're in control, of course. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. I recommend my book, Psychic Dreaming, if you want to learn about the dreamscape and all of that, and even how to kind of work with your dreams to some extent. Otherwise, I do recommend the work of people like Stephen LaBerge, who is the man who actually brought lucid dreaming to the world of psychology and sleep research, even though he's not the first one, which he admitted. He's the first one to actually convince folks in the field of psychology that lucid dreaming was real. There had been two others. The first time lucid dreaming came up was at an address by Frederick von Eden in, I think it was 1911, to the American Society for Psychical Research, and he described lucid dreaming. Outside the field at that time of psychical research, people in psychology denied that that was even possible. People don't have control of their dreams. They're not aware that they're dreaming, all of that. Celia Green, in the 1960s, wrote a book on lucid dreaming, a parapsychologist and psychologist, again, ignored by the psychological community for not being real, not a real thing. It's really, in many respects, it's really interesting when people attack parapsychology research in the lab, controlled research, or anything to do with our field, and say it's not real science. And that we don't have, and here's a true criticism of the field. We do not have a cohesive theory or model of how psychic functioning might work. We don't. I don't know that we're at that point in all of our science to be able to describe consciousness in that way. So it's really interesting that we get attacked on that point. We can concede that and see that's true. You know what? It's true in psychology. Very true in psychology. And, psychologists often make mistakes. The diagnostic manual, the DSM, has made some serious errors in symptomology of certain mental disorders that they're making assumptions about. It's not been too long. It's been about 10, 15 years when one symptom of schizophrenia was removed from the DSM, and that was that the people were having psychic experiences. Somehow that was a signal that somebody was schizophrenic. So you can be schizophrenic and be psychic, but that's not the same thing. All right. Let's see. Paul Raymond Moody just published a new book called 7 Proofs of Life After Life. I'll take a look at that. I haven't seen that one. Okay. So what about trying to remote view while lucid dreaming? So again, Sunset, if you are in a lucid dream, you can make yourself a medium. You can make yourself a remote viewer. You can tell yourself to do that. Make sure you also talk about waking up and remembering the dream. That's important. Okay, Kelly, I watched a workshop on remote viewing and lucid dreaming by Stephen Greer. Never tried it, but I've been able to transcended my meditation practice. It does feel all right. So let me recommend the books on remote viewing by two people, mainly Joe McMoneagle. He's like one of the best known remote viewers in the world. He's on YouTube. You can find a lot of videos of him doing his doing a remote viewing on TV. You can, if you read about him, you'll read about him in the book ESP Wars, East and West, which I co-authored with Ed May and Joe McMoneagle. And Joe was the #1 viewer, kind of like known as the best or one of the top viewers for the U.S. Army project, the Stargate program. Also, Paul H. Smith, who is currently teaching a remote viewing class for the Rhine Education Center. You can still join the class. All right, it's rhineedu.org. You can join the class, and Paul teaches this class every once in a while. Also a viewer for the Stargate program. His book also is very good about this, but Joe's books really go into some real simple methods for remote viewing, I think. Okay, what 3 paranormal parapsychological books would you recommend to read on the beach while on vacation? Well, one, right off the bat, because obviously you don't want to be bogged down with too much academic stuff on the beach. One would be the book The Ghost Hunters by Deborah Blum, B-L-U-M. That is written like a novel, and it's about the start of the field. It's about the SPR and the ASPR and all the people involved and the original ghost hunters, essentially. It's a really well-written book. It reads like a novel, but it's historical in context. Another one similar to that is called Unbelievable by Stacey Horn. And that's a similar kind of novelization of the history of the work by J.B. Rhine, the Duke Parapsychology Lab, and what's known today as the Rhine Research Center. So that's another good one I'd highly recommend. And then, of course, any of my books. I would actually recommend either ESP Wars if you are really interested in remote viewing and also interested in politics, because the politics of remote viewing and psychic spying is all over that book. We have contributions in that book from the Russian counterparts of Joe McMoneagle and some of the researchers. That's a good one. Or maybe I'll suggest my Psychic Dreaming book is a good one. Or perhaps for fun, if you're going to read the other 2 books, which are more historical, perhaps one of the mysteries that I've co-authored, either Near Death or Afterlife, which are focused on a couple of investigators named Rainey and Day, and one's a parapsychologist, anthropologist. The other one is a former police detective who actually has a near-death experience in the first book, but still stays a skeptic, even though his NDE helps him helps him find the guys who shot him. So, and then I can also say that pretty much any of Dean Radin's books are also worth reading on the beach as well. Okay, let's see here. Liz is saying, yes, I would call people in my lucid dreams. You know, again, if you're lucid dreaming, if you're aware you're dreaming and you want to talk to your grandfather or grandmother and they're deceased, I would do that. I mean, you can pretty much do a lot that's there. Okay, thank you, Sunset. And Paul, I'm glad you enjoyed ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists. It is still in print or as a Kindle book. I think it's actually better as a Kindle book these days. And it's not so much out of date. I mean, there's some things that have happened since that I wrote that book a long time ago, but it's still right on point for a lot of things. And soon I'll be bringing back, I just have not had the time to do it, bringing back my paranormal case book back into print. And that definitely would be beach reading, I think. Whew, that's a lot kind of coming and going as we go here. You know, there's a lot of good books on parapsychology or on this subject. A lot of good books on ghosts that are out there. So it really depends on the kind of flavor of what you're looking for. There's even fun skeptical stuff that you might read as well, believe it or not. So it's there's a wide bit of literature, and it's always amazing to me how much we have. I mean, you can see some books behind me, but I will turn this around real quick. Let's see if I can show this. Some of it's going to be in the dark, but you can see that I've got a fairly good sized library here. Got several bookshelves. I got a lot behind me. I know this is not the best way to do this, but these are all my parapsychology books are here in the room. So there's quite a bit behind me and everywhere else. I have a few thousand books here. Some old, some newer, just varies quite a bit. So I have a whole series of shelves that are more antiquarian books that are there. There we go. Try to fix this a little bit here. Years ago, actually, yeah, just a few books. Years ago, and it was probably about 15 years ago when eBay first got started, I was looking for books, some of the out-of-print books from early days of our field, and eBay had a lot of them pretty reasonably. But there were times that I was in, oh, I can't fix this camera quite right here. Let me see if I can get this right here. Let's do this way. There we go. That's a little better. There were times that I was clearly bidding against the same person multiple times. And that turned out to be my colleague, Carlos Alvarado. We realized we were bidding against each other, which is pretty interesting in itself. But fortunately, Carlos, yeah, I think the availability kind of changed quite a bit. So we ended up not. And every once in a while, I would recognize he was bidding on it, and I'd have to call him up and tell him we were doing that. So, okay, let's see here. Liz, your youngest son is nonverbal, and last lucid dream you had, he was talking to you. Yeah, that's a telepathic connection for sure. I mean, that happens in lucid dreaming quite a bit. All right. Let's see. And thank you, everybody, for saying my books are amazing. I appreciate that. Oh, Suzanne Summers died. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, actually, I was watching Saturday Night Live last night, and they had one of the people was portraying Terry Bradshaw, former football player and actor, and I believe he passed away last week also. Thank you, Sunset. I like my library too. I've actually pared my library down. We call that weeding. I have currently 15 banker's boxes of books, a lot of books on the occult and some ghost books and things like that. I had a book sale when I got rid of some books years ago, and I'm going to be doing another one sometime soon. So have to do that again, get kind of to pare down just to clear space in the garage. And you didn't even see that in my walk-in closet that I have here in my office, I actually have 3 bookcases with one is filled with books on magic and mentalism. Half the shelves at least are some of the skeptical books. And then I have a lot of other stuff that I kind of collect here as well. I think it's just good having books for reference. And of course, people ask me, have you read them all? And the answer is no. Probably never will, but I've referred to most of them in one way, shape, or form. All right, Sunset. I have someone talk to me in lucid dreams all the time. Too bad I'm too much of a chicken to ask this person if this person's experiencing anything you are. You should ask. Just say, I had a dream about you, and see if they respond. That's all you have to say. That's not an unusual thing to say at all. So try that. Okay, Paul, I used to have many books. I had to get rid of a lot of them. I've gotten rid of books over the years. In fact, when I moved from the East Coast, I left a lot of my books in my folks' house, and then years later, I had them ship them out, and I lost 4 or 5 boxes of books, although I've been able to reclaim them through various used bookstores and actually places like eBay over the years, but still missing a few from my original collection. Mew just joined. What makes you sure of survival from these phenomenons instead of super psi? So that's a good question. So for those who don't know, super psi is the term in parapsychology that refers to ESP and possibly psychokinesis as behind even ghostly experiences, near-death experiences where there's verification, mediums picking up very evidential information, and so on. It's just ESP with the living or ESP with sources of information that exist. There's a lot of context that in these cases, even with mediums, but even the apparition cases where we might have apparitions over time. And unless there's two things here. Number one, we do know that hauntings people can experience things over time, different witnesses, not even knowing the story, because it's recorded into the environment. What seems to be different in the apparition cases over time and otherwise is actually communication, conversation. We also see cases like the reincarnation cases with kids who remember previous lives. If that is ESP alone, if they're picking up information, considering the fact that that's the only form of essential ESP that's happening, that seems a little odd. They don't grow up as psychic kids, with rare exception. They don't exhibit any other form of ESP. We also see that in some of the apparition cases. There's a number of issues, and really, frankly, it really boils down to this. You look at all the evidence of phenomena we call as evidence for survival of bodily death or life after death. And if you are someone who is a pure materialist, or a materialist who does not expect or believe or approach things from the philosophy that consciousness can be different than brain, then you're going to look at that evidence and say it's got to be super psi, because the other is too complex. But if you are someone who's more of a dualist, or in some other philosophical basis where you say consciousness could be something different than brain, more than brain, possibly not, exists without the body or brain being alive, then you look at the evidence and it falls right into place with that. And a lot of it does have to do with personal philosophy and beliefs and the way you're trained to look at the evidence in that way. So my friend Ed May, who is a parapsychologist, physicist, he was the director of the Stargate program for a number of years through its closing. He is more of a materialist. He does work with ESP and remote viewing, of course. Consciousness does reach out beyond just the brain case in that way, or can get information that way. But he doesn't believe in survival per se. However, he's very intrigued and expressed this by the kids who remember previous lives, for example, because he doesn't see ESP as the explanation for that. He has heard me talk about some of my cases, and he's finding it hard to bring together with the idea of super psi just alone. So there are folks who still look at this stuff and say, well, there's still something going on that just doesn't fit the mode of even saying it's super duper ESP or super psi in that way. Okay. And I personally have no problem with consciousness being more than brain, different than brain, existing on its own after death. And the evidence supports that. Okay, let's see. Tina, New Yerds, just watched Paul Rubens as a Pee Wee Herman interview Suzanne Summers when he guest hosted the Joan Rivers show. Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at that. I heard that was actually a fun interview. Paul used to work at Amazon years ago. We sold a lot of paranormal books. I think there are a lot of paranormal books being sold. I have to say that there's a lot of paranormal crap books out there too, and there's some good books. And I'm not talking about necessarily ghost books here. There are plenty of books by psychics. This goes back decades, who talk about how they became psychic as the only way to become psychic or to expand your psychic abilities. There was a project done, Robert Morris, I believe he was at Syracuse University when he did this. He had his students buying books, basically mass market paperbacks by psychics on psychic development or psychic experience, their own personal growth, just being psychic. And there was a core bit of concepts there, which kind of fit in with the way we talk about psychic development. But there was all this other stuff. I mean, I've met psychics who said, well, I was an abused child, and every psychic I've ever met was abused as a child. And yet I know psychics and mediums who they have happy families. They never had any abuse in their lives, didn't have physical trauma. It varies from person to person quite a bit. So there's a lot of books out there that they're sincere. There's a lot where people are not sincere, but there are those who are sincere, but they're coming at it from a very personal perspective, and expect that everybody is the same. And everybody's not the same. That's pretty clear. Okay. Kelly, to Liz. Okay. Thank you for that to Liz. And let's see, we're kind of, right now, we're at a kind of a stopping point. So if anyone's interested, it is still time, like I said a few minutes ago, you can go to rhinedu.org and you can still sign up for the classes, one of which is a 4-week remote viewing class. You can catch up. The lecture last week was recorded. You can sign up still with Paul Smith. Paul Smith is the instructor for the remote viewing class. I have a class on Wednesday nights, which is recorded, so you can watch it anytime after that, or you can be there live, which is called Paranormal Case Studies, where I'm going deep dive into a number of my cases, but also into a couple of seminal cases in the field, kind of like one of the main poltergeist cases from 1958, and then also a reincarnation case that was investigated by Ian Stevenson, a case of psychic fraud that I investigated. So you can still sign up for that. And you can either sign up as someone who wants a grade, meaning that it'll count towards a certificate, or you can just sign up and take it for fun. So, you can do either one. All right, Melody, I'm glad you're enjoying Annette's workbook. That is Discovering Your Psychic World, hopefully back in print soon. Contact me if you are interested in that. All right, Armando. Hello, Armando. What's your stance on using Ovilus or SB7 Spirit Box for investigations? Don't rely on it as giving you evidence. Number one, as with EVP, there's interpretation that goes on. People often make what they hear on the spirit boxes fit the questions or fit the circumstances, and you can't really do that. All right, that's number one. Number two, if they really work the way they claim to work, which are random systems that randomly either scan what their information is, or what's for the Ovilus, what's programmed in their data bank, and randomly selecting either phonemes or words, or if they're scanning radio signals randomly, somebody needs to check and see if they really are random systems. And either way, we have a lot of evidence from research findings in the laboratory that living people unconsciously can affect random systems. So it's just as likely, if not more likely, if you have no other indication that there's an actual apparition or ghost there, just as likely it's the operator or one of the other people that's there that's making that particular word come up. So we really don't rely on those at all, and really can't. All right, let's see here. I think I came fast and furious there for a minute. Paul, you enjoyed watching my interview on the We Don't Die podcast. Thank you. Trying to think if I have anything scheduled. I think there may be a couple that are still out there. I've got to post a list of the more recent podcasts someplace. I will probably do that on my Facebook. It's lloyd.auerbach.author page, and also put it out on X, and see about putting it here as well in the near future. I did a few that are just kind of now being released at this point. Okay, Mew, thanks. I do think survival is a simpler explanation, more Occam's razor than super psi. So, Bill Roll, the late William Roll, who was the kind of the father of our modern model of poltergeists, really leaned towards a more materialist perspective, a living person perspective for apparitional phenomena. And he came up with a model, even for those longer term cases where one witness has a communication with an apparition in 1950, and in 1955, some other witness who didn't even know the place was haunted relates that they have this conversation with the ghost, and the ghost refers to a conversation they had in 1950. So almost like one builds on another. And his model was very much focused on this idea that information is imprinted in the environment, but that our brains use imagination to animate and create this false conversation, which then gets recorded in the environment. I'm not really doing the full thing justice because honestly, it's incredibly complex. And someone who worked with Bill Roll explaining this to me said to me, it's much simpler a model than consciousness surviving death. And I had to look at him and just simply said, you're a materialist, aren't you? And he said, yes. I said, well, okay, then that is simpler explanation for you, because you can't imagine how consciousness could exist on its own or how it could survive death and so on, because we don't know what consciousness is yet. So I think it's premature um, to assume that it's not that. And to me, what Mew is saying is, yes, it's much simpler to assume that consciousness survives death in some way. All right. Graveyard Grog, you personally think of those out there that have the ability, it's born with something that permits their mind to bring in more information than that of the average developed brain. You know, what we have seen over time in research and otherwise is that kids tend to be more psychic than adults, and then they lose it. And they can get it back, but they lose it because they're educated out of being psychic, or told that it's wrong, or told that it's not real, or that it's impossible, or it's the devil. So that gets put aside. There's a lot of psychology involved in what's suppressing that. So it's a matter of actually kind of bringing it back out. But some people are born with more of an aptitude, just like some people are born with an aptitude for art. Some people are born with an aptitude for music, for creativity in other ways. There's a definite connection between creativity and psychic abilities. So it's pretty interesting that people have different expressions of what they're good at in being psychic. Somebody might be better at doing psychic healing, and maybe that's all they can do. They can't do any remote viewing. They can't do any ESP things at all. Somebody else might have really good success at precognition. Somebody else might be really good at remote viewing, but can't do psychometry. They can't hold an object and get information from it. There are many expressions or ways that psychic ability can be used, or applications of psychic ability, and not everybody's good at everything. Even the best psychics, not everybody can apply it the same way. We have to find our aptitudes. That's important. Okay, and thank you, Vicki, for saying that about my course. Paul Smith's remote viewing class at the Rhine starts Tuesday, November 7th. Oh, that's what, all right, so it hasn't started. I wasn't even aware it hadn't started yet, but thank you, Tina. So yeah, definitely sign up for Paul. If you're interested in remote viewing, sign up for Paul's class, for sure, which starts next month. All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Yeah, and especially if there's not a pattern, people will kind of play with things. All right, you tend to lean towards survival rather than super psi. You can't say you know for sure. Well, nobody knows anything for sure. We don't know what consciousness is, right? At this point, we always have to evolve our opinions based on new information. That's important. That's how science goes forward. And as soon as you say nothing new under the sun, right off the bat, you are dogmatic and stuck. So new advances of science either happen accidentally to people who believe that they're done, or people who look to the unusual, to the unexpected, or speculate. Sunset, you were told you were going to hell for having psychic abilities. I've been told I was going to hell for talking about this stuff, for promoting it. But then again, the people who told me I was going to hell, from conversation with them, I think that if they had learned that I was Jewish, they probably would have said the same thing. So, and frankly, I grew up not believing in hell or the devil, so it's not a big deal for me. All right, when you don't believe in hell, that's not a threat of any kind. Okay. Which can also, psychics who have children have the same who have children. So, yeah, so actually psychic ability, we hear it runs in families, and there seems to be a genetic component, but it's probably just as much nurture as nature with psychics who have kids. And some people believe it skips a generation, and lo and behold, in their family, it skips a generation. So whether that came from an observation or simply they suppressed that one person who had skipped, it's hard to say. Paranormal concierge, what's interesting is that I can tune into a location, but are horrible with psychometry, because that's not your ability, Mariah. Susanna, good to see you here. Thanks for saying that. Okay. Patrick, having a great time with Jimmy Jimmy's class. That's Jimmy Aiken is teaching Introduction to Parapsychology. You can also register for that right now. All right. Paul, I agree. We need to follow the data like Bruce Grayson says. I know people who are dogmatic Christians and dogmatic atheists. Yeah, there's actually a lot of dogmatic atheists out there. And, what's really interesting is that the way and actually, there are a few major scientists who are more dogmatic atheists, and actually they're militant atheists. They make fun of people who believe in anything religious, or make fun of people who believe in the paranormal and so on, or even consider it as a possibility. They're as dogmatic as the very, 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 very fundamentalists, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and everybody else in every religion. So behavior-wise, not much difference. Look down on people who don't believe the same way they do. And that should never be the case at all. Okay. And Armando, aside from the recorders and cameras, what other tools are you using in investigation? All right. So here's the deal. From the perspective of our field, we know there are no devices that can detect ghosts, psychic ability, psychic information, psychic energy, whatever you want to call it. There are no devices that can do that. Not directly. So what we try to do is use environmental sensors. That's why the use of magnetic field detectors, by the way, is to look at the magnetic environment and see if it is different or has any anomalies when people are having an experience. You need people having an experience. With hauntings, where they're placed specifically about place, you look at the spots people have the experiences, report them, and see if there's any difference in that point in the environment to the surrounding area. But you must eliminate all other sources of anything that could cause that device to go off. So for an EMF sensor, for example, it's wiring. It can be considered sometimes water running through pipes in the area. So anything electrical, anything like that, there's even natural fields that can actually cause problems there. We use environmental sensors like temperature sensors, EMF sensors, things like that, to look at the environment when someone's having an experience and when someone's not. What's the baseline? You cannot walk in with any of these devices, and certainly not the ones they say are ghost sensors, and detect something, because we don't know what ghosts are made of. And there's not a specific, consistent pattern of anomalies or readings on these devices with an apparitional experience versus a haunting experience. The closest we get with hauntings is the spots do very often have a higher than background EM field, which is weird considering you can turn all the power off in the house and look for other explanations. You don't have any, but they correlate directly. Correlation, not causation. That's important there. Kelly, I guess we'll be meeting up in hell. Yeah, we'll get a clubhouse. How's that? We'll have a hellish clubhouse at that point. All right, Sunset, I'm great at psychometry. If there's a photo, but horrible viewing coordinates, most people who don't have a lot of psychic ability or can't do remote viewing and other things do really well at psychometry. So I've taught a lot of people. We have a psychic development class that I teach every so often. I'm going to be doing, that's probably what I'll be teaching at the Rhine Center on that Saturday workshop on November 11th. There's a real interesting stuff that you could learn, and psychometry is a really fun one to play with. All right. Armando use a K2 meter to determine the location was hot with EMF. K2 meter sucks. Don't ever use a K2 meter. So many things set off a K2 meter. It can be within range of about 50 feet. They really are not good detectors. They're about one of the worst EMF sensors out there. And it can be hot with EMF unless, always important, especially with the K2 meter, turn the power off. I know that's hard to do. I've had cases where we wanted to do that with the family and they let us do it. And other cases where they said, no, we have too many devices that are running. We don't want to turn them off like that or turn off the power. That's okay. But you also can't use those devices, for example, in a house that's near power lines. There was one house we investigated that was right below high tension wires. The EMF meters, even the better ones we had, topped out because the wires were giving off so much. And then there was a place that was truly haunted with an apparition in San Francisco. It doesn't exist anymore. But the wiring in the walls was so bad that we could tell where the worst points of the unshielded wiring was with our EMF sensors. In fact, I found more bad wiring than I found anything with related to the paranormal otherwise. Paul, do you think psychedelics can take you another dimension, or is it all in the brain? No idea. Not my area of expertise. I do know one of the problems with doing research with psychedelics, when it was done with LSD in the days when LSD was fully legal, before Timothy Leary got involved, the problem was people pulling the psychic information out of the psychedelic hallucinations that they were having. And there was some indication that psychedelics could help somebody being psychic, but there was too much noise, you might say, in that circumstance. So it had to have to be done more in a low dose situation. Same thing with mushrooms and such. Let's see. Anyone on here definitely taking that? All right. Let's see. Does anyone on here definitely taking that course for sure? All right. Your text is acting weird. Yeah. So I'm assuming you're talking about the paranormal case studies course. The psychic development course, which is called Developing Intuition, won't be offered again until either spring or even summer next year at this point. Oh, does anyone want to try remote viewing with you? Yeah, I think that either taking that course in November is a good thing. It's a good way you can then kind of connect with other students at that point. If you want to, if you, Sunset, want to send me an email with your email, and then other people want to send me an email, again, the email is in the course in the description of the channel, or you can just send it. Some of you have my other email, which is just profparanormal, PROF paranormal @gmail.com. I can try to hook you up. I'll have to ask for permission on both sides, but you could also just send me an email and say, I want to connect with other people to do a remote viewing experiment, and I'll hook you together. How's that? Okay. Patrick, taking the intro to parapsychology, week 2 starts tomorrow. Yeah, so if you want to do the intro course or my paranormal case studies course, definitely sign up this week. We typically don't let folks sign up until past the 3rd week at all. All right, and we're just about out of time. Thank you, Paul, for noting that. We'll be back in 2 weeks, like I said. It's going to be October 29th. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be in costume or not. I'll have to think about that. I might be. It's close enough to Halloween. And I'm glad the audio and video was good tonight for a change. I know we've had problems with that in the past. So please join me. Please let folks know if Alice. Okay. I didn't know that's who that was. Thank you, Alice. I've got your email as well. So if folks want to do remote viewing with somebody else, just send me an email and I'll hook you together with Alice. All right, everybody, thanks very much for joining. Thanks for anybody subscribing. I really appreciate that. And do let folks know that we've got another one coming on October 29th. And after that, it'll be November 19th. Thank you all. And I hope you all have a great evening tonight. Thanks for tuning in, for being with us. And we can talk TV some more next time, too. So come with your favorite TV show or movie. Maybe we'll talk about our favorite horror or ghost movies for Halloween. How about that? Good night, everybody.